What is up, nerds? Today we're going to talk about borders using borders in CSS. So we are going to add a border to our div elements. We're going to use margins to make our div automatically centered on our page, no matter what, whenever we resize our screen. We're going to add some padding to the div element. We're going to add a max width property to the div so that it looks better on smaller screens, all of that stuff. And all of that is stuff I'm going to let you do on your own. But let's go ahead and talk about borders a little bit. So CSS borders are, they're great. They allow you to essentially just do what it sounds like. Add a border to an element. So you can add a border around nearly any element in HTML. If you want to add a border around your paragraph element, you can. You can add borders around really whatever. And you can add all different kinds of borders. So this one is just a basic border on all sides. This one's a red bottom border. This is a rounded border. This is a left blue border with a lighter blue background highlight. And all of those style changes are designated by border style. So you can set a border style property in CSS and then change that property to one of these. So for example, we have paragraph dotted with a border style dotted property. So border style dotted, which makes a dotted border. We have dashed borders, solid. We have double, groove, ridge, inset, outset, no border, hidden border, and a mixed border style where you can do all kinds of mixed stuff. Now, you might be asking, what's the difference between a no border and a hidden border? Good question. So let's take a look here. So a no border removes the border completely. So it's like there's not even a border on the element at all, just like normal and default. A hidden border, however, applies a border to it, but it takes up that space. It just doesn't show the border. So a border will normally take up a couple of pixels of space around an element. It'll add to the size of the element. A hidden border will add to the size of your element, but you just can't see it, right? So that's the difference. You can set your border width by changing you can change the thickness of your border. You can change the color of your border. You can change individual sides. So you can say border top style dotted, border right style solid, border bottom style dotted, border left style solid. You can get a combination of border styles to make it more stylized. You can do this for your top and bottom and left and right at the same time. Instead of doing 4 different statements, you just do one border style dotted solid, and the dotted will go for the top and bottom. The solid will be for the left and right. Okay. And there's more information here if you want to learn how to mix all that stuff up and do shorthand. You can do shorthand 5 pixel solid red. Usually when I create a border, I'll do border 1 pixel solid black, just to throw a border around an element to see where it is on the page and how far it reaches. That's a good shorthand to use. You can apply a background color to that border, just like we've applied background colors already. You can do it to any element. So this paragraph element takes up the whole line. He applied a background color to it, and then put a red border on the right edge, or the left edge, which makes this cool effect here. Bottom borders, same way. We can apply a border radius property to our borders to give it a rounded edge. Instead of having the hard corners, we can have round corners, and we just set a border radius. So there are a lot of examples here and exercises and stuff to play with. Let's talk about margins. So the margin is the space around the outside of the border. Okay. So when you set a margin property, it sets a space outside, kind of like a buffer area. So if you have like a bunch of pictures in a row on a page, you can set a margin around each picture so they're not completely smushed up against one another. There's a little bit of a margin around them. Margin is literally, honestly, a lot of the same shorthand for borders work for margins. A lot of the same yeah, that's what I wanted to say. A lot of the same shorthand works. So you can do a full shorthand, so margin 100 pixels on the top, and let's see, Does it go right, bottom left? I think. But yeah, you can apply them all in one statement. My favorite thing is the auto value, margin auto. Margin auto will automatically horizontally center the element within its container. That's important, within its container. So if you try to apply this to a block level element, it will center itself inside the container. If you try to apply it to a line level element that takes up the whole line, you're gonna have issues. This is great to use with divs. So like this, where this is a div that is centered because it has a margin auto property, and I can shrink or grow the page and it'll automatically stay in the center. Okay. You can use an inherit value, so you can inherit properties from your parent element, which is fine. I don't really do that a lot, so I'm not going to bother teaching you guys or having you show examples, but you can try it out, and if it's something you like to do, you can do that. You can collapse margins onto each other. And please, again, please go through the exercises, okay? Because you're really going to benefit by practicing. Let's take a look at padding. Padding is awesome. Padding will allow you to set the distance between the elements inside of your border. So between the border and the element on the inside. So where margins are the outside, padding's the inside. Okay? So that'll give you a little bit of a buffer between your border and the element. And it's literally the same as margin. So I'm not really going to dig into that too much. But that's the difference. Margin is outside, padding is inside. And then you have height and width, CSS height and width declarations. Height and width, it's super important, especially when we get into positioning and putting elements on the page properly and making them display properly. There are many ways you can designate height and width. You can do it with a pixel value, so it's always the same amount of pixels. It takes up the same amount of pixels on a page. Or you can do a percent, so that it is exactly half of the page size. So let's take a look at that example. So this is going to be 50% wide. So it's going to take up 50% of the screen. And I can resize the page and it will shrink so that it only takes up 50% of the screen. Percentages, using percentages in your height and width values are great because it allows you to respect different screen sizes. So that's a good practice. Let's see, this one is specifically, both of them are set to pixel values, meaning it's going to always be 100 tall and 500 wide, no matter how big the screen is. So it may look different, it may look weird on smaller screens and stuff. Setting a max width value. Max width is great because tongue-tied today. Max width lets you set a width for your element as the biggest size that it can go. So if you have a big screen, your elements will only go a specific size, but if you shrink it down, they'll start to shrink with the size of the screen so that they still look good. It's kind of the best of both worlds. Let's take a look at that example. So this has a max width of 500 pixels, right? So the screen element here is big enough so that it can show those 500 pixels. That's great. But if I shrink it, it'll start shrinking itself so that it stays on the page, right? And then it will grow until it hits 500 pixels, and then it'll stop growing. So max width is a great thing to use when it comes to setting your width with CSS. So after you go through all those lessons and you try the examples and the exercises and you are an expert in borders, margins, paddings, and width and height, you're going to go back into your CSS file here, and you are going to add a border to your div element. You're going to use margins to automatically center your div element. You are going to add some padding to your div element, and you're going to add a max width property to your div so that you can shrink your screen and it will still display. Okay, when you're done with all those, save your work and zip your files together and then upload them, and you are good to go. Thank you for paying attention, and I will see you next time.